companion series to the Alpha class. The Alpha class is a great Bible study, especially for people who are curious about their faith. And every week we ask a question about God or about life, and then we're answering that question. So today's question is, who is Jesus? That's the big question that we wanted to answer. And I've only got half of the sermon to answer it, so it's going to be tough. But I'm going to do my best. But really, 2 weeks ago, we preached a sermon on how it's all about Jesus, and how we looked at some of the witnesses of what other people have said about him. Today we want to take a little different approach, because really the best way to discover who someone is just to come out and ask them themselves. I don't know about you. Do we have anybody here who's you're just really good at remembering names? Nobody here. All right, we got one person. You're congratulations. You're on our greeter team. The rest of us are terrible with names. In fact, it's embarrassing to me. I often go up to visitors, college kids. I'm like, "Hey, is this your first Sunday?" And they're like, "No, I've been here for 3 years. I'm a senior," and I just feel so bad. So just forgive me ahead of time. But you've all been in that situation where you go to someone, you see someone out of their element. Like you're used to seeing this person maybe at work or maybe you're part of a sports team. I don't know what it might be. But all of a sudden you're in Walmart one day and you see this person and I know who that is, but I can't remember how I know them or what their name is. You ever been in that spot and it just drives you crazy? And you're embarrassed to go ask them, because what if they think you're their best friend? And you don't want to go up and be like, "Hey, I know you from somewhere," but really that's really the only way to solve the dilemma, is to go and ask the person straight up, "Who are you?" If you're with your spouse, I'm always saying to Sarah, "Hey, who is that? Do you know that person?" And she's usually like, "I think we do," but she's not a whole lot of help either. And so you're embarrassed about it, but I think we all agree that if you really want to get to know someone, while it's important to give references, and that's not weird, you don't need to give references about a new friend. Maybe you do. The best way to get to know someone is simply to say, "Hey, tell me about yourself. Who are you?" In fact, I just told you we're all going to meet Anna later. None of you know her, very few of you do. The only way we're going to get to know her is to actually interview her and get to know her. Oh, Sarah's out Anna bulletins. Please forgive us for the late bulletin delivery. We got fancy bulletins today, and the fancy bulletins are just complicated, all right? And we're just not a fancy church at all. We'll be going back to our standard black and white one-page bulletin next week. As it is, you'll maybe hang on to this one, put it in your Bible for the next 3 years. Carry it with you. So if somebody ever asks, "Tell me about your church," you're like, "Oh, one Sunday I went to church and they gave us this really nice bulletin." They'll be sure to come back. All right. So here we are. We're going back to the Bible because we want to know who Jesus is. All right. And in particular, as we've looked through the book of John, there is a passage where some people actually come to Jesus and say, "Tell us plainly who you are." They were frustrated. They wanted to know exactly who Jesus was. And so let's read this passage today. It's going to be found in John chapter 10, verses 22 to 24 to begin with. All right, so this is what we read. "At that time, the Feast of Dedication took place in Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the colonnade of Solomon. So the Jews gathered around him and said to him, 'How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly.'" How long will you keep us in suspense? We just want to know who you are. Are you just a good moral teacher? Do you claim to be the Messiah? Are you just a carpenter who preaches on the weekends? What exactly are you? Now, as I studied this, most commentators agree that this is not a friendly question. That the people who are asking Jesus, "Tell us who you are actually the religious leaders who are very threatened by Jesus. All right? He's been teaching things that they don't agree with. He's been saying things that make them look bad, saying things like, love your enemies, and they're not very good at that, or take care of the poor. And he's been healing people. Sometimes he heals people on the Sabbath day, and they just can't wrap their minds around why anybody would do that. And so they're really frustrated with Jesus, and in particular, they have been wanting to get rid of him for quite a while. And they have a plan. They've concocted a scheme in which, you see, it's important to realize that Israel at this point is under the rule of Rome, all right? And so Israel can't just go and kill someone that they don't like. The Jewish people can't just murder someone. They have to get approval from the Roman government, all right? And so they're thinking, listen, if we can convince the Roman government that this guy Jesus is claiming to be like the Messiah, and by Messiah, like the new king, he's going to overthrow Rome, then we can go to Rome and say, hey, Caesar, listen up. We've got this bad egg in the group, this Jesus, he claims to be the Messiah. You should probably get rid of him. And so that's really what they're asking, because if we look back through the book of John, you'll find that Jesus has been very clear in what he's doing. He's not only has he healed many people, but just look at some of the things that Jesus has already said about himself. Earlier in John, for instance, he has said, I am the bread of life. Or, I am the door. I think I've got these on the screen there somewhere. Do I? Maybe. All right, there you go. Or, I am the light of the world. Or, I am the door for the sheep. At one point, he even says, you are from below, I am from above. You are of this world, I am not of this world. All right, so he's been hinting all along, like especially that last one, that he's God. And in particular, if you remember the story of the Samaritan woman, he actually comes out and tells her, I am the Messiah. In addition to all of the miracles that he's done. But the problem for the religious leaders is that they can't convict him of any of these things. Quite frankly, the Roman government could care less if Jesus wanders around saying that he's the bread of life, or the light of the world, or the door for the sheep, or that he's from... They don't really care if he says that he's God. All right? No, he's just a crazy guy wandering around saying he's God. What the Roman government cares about is if he says, I'm going to become the new king. Then they can arrest him. And so the religious leaders are really trying to catch Jesus. They want to impose on him a title and a meaning for that title that will get Jesus into trouble. And so that's why they are so frustrated, right? Another way to maybe interpret what they say when they said to him, how long are you going to keep us in suspense? Why will you stop driving us crazy? Just tell us. Just tell us. And so Jesus does. And I love the way that Jesus answers their question here. We'll read 25 to 30. Jesus answered them, I told you, you don't believe. The works that I do in my Father's name bear witness about me. But you do not believe because you are not among my sheep. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. And then verse 30 is the big one. I and the Father are one. And with that statement, he makes perfectly clear to the religious leaders around him and to all of his followers and his disciples that he claims to be God. He and God, the Father, are equal. But you'll notice that he doesn't use any kind of a definition that will incriminate him. Again, the Roman government doesn't really care that much if he claims to be God, but the religious leaders do, and it infuriates him. All right? They're so angry. Look at what they say here in verses 31 to 33. The Jews picked up stones again to stone him, which means that they've already tried to stone him once before. Sometimes we forget that before Jesus died on the cross, there were multiple attempts on his life. People were that angry with the message of Jesus. And Jesus answered them, I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of them are you going to stone me? And then the Jews answered him. And this is a pretty important verse here. It is not for a good work that we are going to stone you, but for blasphemy, because you, being a man, make yourself God. They understood exactly what Jesus meant when he said, I and the Father are one. And they did not like it one bit. He infuriated, and I think what infuriated them the most, all right, was the fact that he was living this perfect life, claiming to be God and actually living out what it's like to be God. I personally, in my life, come across at least 2 individuals who had some mental trouble and told me that they were Jesus Christ. I didn't want to kill them for that. Like, I felt bad for them. I felt a little creeped out both times. At one time, I was working in Sears, and this man came up. I was trying to sell him a lawn tractor, and halfway through it, I was a salesman at Sears. I wasn't just shopping. It's not like I go to the mall and then just try to sell people stuff. Right. This was years ago. I was a salesman at Sears, and I'm selling a lawnmower or something to this guy, and halfway through, he's just like, "Hey, I'm Jesus Christ. Feel my power." He didn't buy a lawn tractor from me that day, but it really was an uncomfortable situation, as you can imagine. But we meet people who claim to be God, and we don't hate them for it. We just understand that they're confused, or they have a misunderstanding of the gospel. But Jesus, when he makes this claim, they don't just say, "Oh, Jesus, you're just silly." They want to kill him because of it. And I think it's because in their hearts, they recognize the truth, and the truth condemned them. Later on, Jesus even says, elsewhere in the Gospels, demons believe in me, and they shudder. You can have an understanding, you can believe that Jesus is God, but not have that belief turn into acceptance, not be a follower of him. And I think that in some regards, these religious leaders are wrestling with this. Maybe something in them tells them that what Jesus is saying is true, but they just hate the truth so much as a result. Well, one of the things that this claim that Jesus gives to these men, and to the disciples and anybody else that day, and even to us as we read this thousands of years later, is that it puts us at a crossroads. Because if Jesus did not claim to be God, then we could just approach his life and view him as an excellent teacher, someone who lived a righteous life, who did wonderful miracles even, someone who had great words of wisdom, all right? And leave it at that. We wouldn't have to make the jump to him being God, because there were other people in the Bible who were great teachers and who did miracles through the power of God, the Father. And so, but this moment right here really puts not only the religious leaders, but us at a crossroads too, because this means that we've got to do something about what Jesus says that he is. C.S. Lewis writes in his book, Mere Christianity, that he was an atheist for many years, and that as he read the Gospels, he himself came to this crisis of faith, where when he realized that Jesus claimed to be God, he realized that this meant 3 things. And many apologists, whatever, people who argue about their faith, have used this for evidence, all right? And this is what Lewis has decided. He says, when he came to this realization, it means that either Jesus Christ is a liar, all right, that he knew that he wasn't God, but he went around telling people that he was, and it completely discredits all of the other things that he's done in the gospel. Or, Lewis says, he's a lunatic. That is, that he thinks, like the people that I've met who said that they were God, that he's just a poor, distressed, incompetent man who wanders around thinking that he's God. His intentions are the best, but he's really just crazy. And in the end, I personally don't want to follow a crazy man. You put up with me as your pastor, that's enough. And you don't, and so that really discredits his teaching as well. Or you realize that the fact that Jesus claims to be God means that you have to decide if he's going to be your Lord. Is he a liar? Is he a lunatic? Or is he a Lord? And so when Jesus says this, it forces a decision on our parts, because we have to do something with him. We either have to believe in him, or we have to not believe in him. There's no 2 ways around it. We can't just say, yeah, he's a decent guy, but either he's a decent guy who's crazy, or he is God. So Jesus' roads also put us at a crossroads in another way as well. Because Jesus has indicated in this passage, when he says that he and the Father are one, that he's the shepherd, and that there are sheep that are part of his flock. And then earlier on, in fact, if you were to go back a few verses, we'll just read those in verses 16 and 17. Earlier in the chapter, This teaching actually takes place a month or two earlier in Jesus' ministry, but his disciples would have remembered this, and John puts these back to back for a purpose. In John 10, verses 16 and 17, Jesus says this. Jesus says this, "And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice, so that there will be one flock and one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life, and I may take it up again." So this Jesus has been building on this teaching of him being the shepherd, and that he has a flock, and there are people that belong to his flock that are not a part of it yet. And so it doesn't just put us at a crossroads of what will we personally believe. It puts us at a crossroads of what will we do about this. In other words, who Jesus says he is makes us who we are, and it changes our lives dramatically. To simply recognize that Jesus is God isn't enough. There must be a change of lifestyle. And part of that lifestyle that we want to talk about in particular today is that we begin to, like Jesus, care deeply for the sheep that aren't part of his flock yet. That if we believe that Jesus is Lord, then that means that we kind of team up with him in going out and finding the lost sheep and bringing them into his pasture as well.